Wanikisa, good afternoon. MIT and its MLK program has been recognized for the impact the scholar appointments have had on students and student life, and to the entire MIT community through our or their respective teachings, services, expertise, and research. It's an impact that in some cases extends out to the broader metropolitan area, as you may see some of them or find out that they get invited to present at other higher ed institutions or places like the Boston Museum of Science, where I was last June. So our visiting professors and scholars come from all over the world and bring with them experiences and education that is unlike any other program. The positive impacts are endless, and some scholars go on to do second appointments. What I've found most rewarding is not only in getting to know all of you, but in working and engaging cross-departmentally, providing greater reach to more students and other faculty members, all working together. And I want to thank my sponsors, very importantly from Anthro and DUSP. In Anthro, Chris Wally, Bettina Stotzer, and my Anishinaabe Ojibwe sister, Sonia Adelaide. In DUSP, Janelle Knox-Hayes, my Tunica Biloxi brother, Jean-Luc Perit, and Chris Segras. And a very special thanks to Paula Hammond and her team, Charisse and Megan, for their hard work to keep this program intact, as its benefits are endless for the MIT community overall. Your work is recognized, valued, and honored. Thank you. My words of wisdom during the coming years are not unique, but more about self-preservation. Hang on tight, stay mindful, because we're living through some intensely precarious times, as you're all witnessing on a day-to-day basis. Faculty and leadership are stressed, students are stressed, but self-care and being there for others is really important right now. I always say to my students that it's my shoulders you get to stand on and lift yourselves up from. I'm here for you, and I will continue to be. We have to remember they're stepping into some very scary times, as many are international. This enriching diversity that has typically brought endless gifts is now being threatened. So stay strong, stay wise, and stay centered. And on another note, please pray for our Kipnuk and Kui-Gilinga relatives in Alaska severely hit by Typhoon Halong. Katapatanamu wachi aki katahanash ka awasak. I really want to thank you all for the land and the water and the creatures that all live here, that you're a part of. So to start, just a little background. I, as mentioned, I'm an elder Eel Clan member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, and I'm an Indigenous land and water conservationist, environmental activist. I mostly speak from the perspective of the rights of nature. So as I sit in a room full of students, scientists, educators, and others, this is my worldview. I sit on a number of local, state, and federal environmental boards, the Conservation Law Foundation, going after the big polluters in the state of Massachusetts, the state's Justice 40 Commission on Environmental Justice Issues, and amplifying marginalized communities' voices as it relates to the impacts of climate and some of the solutions that the state's coming up with to address those. I'm an advisor to the Massachusetts governor on the Cape Cod National Seashore, a founding board officer of the Native Land Conservancy, which is the first Indigenous land conservation group east of the Mississippi. And recently, I'm a Community Land and Water Coalition member of Southeastern Massachusetts, fighting the strip mining, land mining, sand mining wars going on in Plymouth and Carver. And I do sleep at night. I began my nonprofit environmental work early in my life at the New Alchemy Institute on Cape Cod. This was a pioneering research institute that investigated organic farming, agriculture, aquaculture, and bioshelter with very little reliance on fossil fuels. It was cutting-edge technology in the 70s. At that time, creating alternative systems that would set the tone for a greener future. The The Institute's research work discovered and modeled greener, self-sustaining systems, pioneering avenues in biotech research and design way, way ahead of its time. The founders, John and Nancy Todd and William McLarney's mission was to restore the lands, protect the seas, and inform the Earth's stewards. Developing ecologically derived food, water, shelter, and energy systems while completely rethinking how such systems were designed. Together, these pioneers aimed to redirect the trajectory of technology development for humanity's future. Part of my job at the time was to assist the alchemists in maintaining the land in order to research human support systems of food, water, and shelter, and to, very importantly, completely rethink and replan how these systems were designed based on Western designs. So I prepared garden beds and created compost piles the size of small houses. But one of my fondest memories was that I learned how to drive a 1960 3-speed on the column Ford pickup at 13 years old. I felt more alive doing this work than I have felt doing anything else. At this job, we built fences and stone walls to keep certain creatures in and other creatures out. This early work so far in my life has been my all-time favorite job. Living and working so very close to the land. I talk about this because it truly shaped a lot of my worldview today. But let's fast forward to where this discussion is leading us in the importance of protecting our forests. I'll start out with a wider lens in that our beautiful forests globally cover 1/3 of the Earth's land surface. That's 15.6 billion square miles. But looking at some of the global data during the 20 years between 2000 and 2020, the global intact forest landscapes, also known as IFLs, lost 12% of their area. This 12% is equivalent to a 3-fold area of Spain. So what's an intact forest, you might ask? An intact forest landscape, or IFL, is a seamless mosaic of forest and naturally treeless ecosystem within the zone of the current forest extent, which exhibits no remotely detected signs of human activity or habitat fragmentation. It's large enough to maintain all native biological diversity, including viable populations of very wide-ranging species. So IFLs would then obviously have high conservation yield and are critical for stabilizing terrestrial carbon storage, harboring biodiversity, regulating hydrological regimes, and providing other ecosystem functions. Essentially, the way this data is gathered is through an IFL method that maps and monitors the remaining forest wildlands globally via publicly available satellites. And they can detect most types of forest conversion and industrial fragmentation. So we talk about fragmentation of our forests. Who's most responsible for the loss of our forests globally, you might ask? Russia, Canada, Brazil, Bolivia, Indonesia, and Peru are responsible for 70% of the total IFL loss area, with Russia having the highest increase of the annual IFS loss by 140% between the 7-year time period of 2013 to 2020. We then ask, what's the main driver of global deforestation? Most, if not all of you in this room, know it's agriculture. Beef and soy are the leading drivers of habitat loss. This chart shows the loss over a 10,000-year timeline from the Earth's surface of forests, shrubs, and grasslands. Essentially, humans basically have destroyed 1/3 of the world's forests through agriculture. Given this loss, what then might be some of the solutions to traditional or more Western agricultural practices? I've noticed an increase in conversations to produce more food in sustainable ways, like all of you have, whether it's utilizing more greenhouses, vertical framing, and other alternative farming systems. So I truly look forward to the days when vast areas of land aren't cleared for beef and soy. Where does the greatest deforestation happen? The greatest deforestation happens in the tropics, right? We've all heard about the rainforests, Let's look at estimates of deforestation from the latest UN forest report. To put these numbers in context, during the 1990s and the first decade of the 2000s, an area half the size of India was deforested. Even with improved rates in the 2010s, which is considered some progress, but really does need to happen much faster. Of note, the data shows raw deforestation rates without any adjustment for regrowth or plantation of forests, which can also be called silviculture, and is arguably not as good for ecosystems or carbon storage because new growth doesn't always offset the initial loss. Essentially, my point is the world is still losing large amounts of primary forests every year. In the tropics, we watch and hear of the devastating stories of the continued assaults on rainforests in places like the Amazon. This is particularly tragic because these are regions with the highest levels of biodiversity and the most ancient indigenous communities who have lived with and on their land in the ancestral ways that they always have for thousands and thousands of years. These are the Amazon's indigenous peoples who are responsible for shaping the Amazon by the trees they cultivated over millennia and having a distinct, profound impact on the rainforest's composition. Some examples of the trees are Brazil nut, cacao, palm, and the rubber tree. It's been recently recorded by researchers who stated that many of the tree species populating the Amazon region appear to be abundant because they were cultivated by the native peoples who populated the area for many millennia pre-European contact. And while tropical rainforests cover about 7% of the Earth's dry land, they are home to about half of all the species on Earth. Half of the species on Earth come from these places. Now, while I'm always interested in the general status and condition of our forests worldwide, because it's typically an indication of what's going on geopolitically, agriculturally, industrially, economically, developmentally, we can use all of the lees, and environmentally around the world, I'll move a little closer to home, right here in the Northeast. So our job in conserving our forest landscapes is a responsibility of great significance to me. And as the planet's stewards, there is a responsibility that flows from we humans to the earth through the act of reciprocal relationships. So as we zoom in closer to home and look at our region, well, we're lucky in comparison to the kinds of threats that are happening worldwide. But this isn't to say that we can or should sit back and comfortably relish in the pristine landscapes that drape our gorgeous views, providing us with visually drop-dead backdrops to our lives here that are second to none, quite frankly, the kind of views that are deservingly seen in publications like National Geographic. But what we ought to do is consider a new or renewed relationship to our forests and take an approach more closely aligned to traditional indigenous worldviews. By this, I mean recognizing a worldview that ensures our forests' future. And in doing so, ensures that your children and their children are on board with this. That they too understand the forest's value and our responsibility to stewardship and caring for her. So all of these interactions, connections, and interrelations speak to the power of relationality. Our relationship to our forests. A connectedness to these places, the land and the water, the day and the night sky, to the spirit world of our ancestors who walked before us, and to one another. Family, community, and to all living creatures on this earth. It is a lived experience where our kin, our relationships, are tied to our past, present, and future on these lands. On Cape Cod, where I'm from, we celebrated our own old-growth forest in P-Town. Provincetown's beech forest joined the Old Growth Forest Network a couple of years ago. When the settlers arrived in the early 17th century, much of the Cape's backdrop was covered in pine oak forests and groves of hickory, red maple, and birch, and beech trees. But over the next 200 years, the settlers cleared almost all of these forests, but due to the forest's, this particular forest's low-lying position, it was spared from the logging. So as I celebrate our old-growth forests, I want to highlight a couple of special trees that truly bring the gifts of good food and good medicine. The eastern white pine is revered across Indigenous cultures as a symbol of wisdom, longevity, and peace. We are grateful for their gifts of medicine, fuel, and food, and for their spiritual gifts, as author, educator, and botanist Robin Wall Kimmerer describes. Pines are understood as among our oldest teachers. In fact, they are of an ancient lineage in the tree world and have seen much change across the earth. In Wampanoag culture, we are matrilineal, which means the women lead. We lead through the clan system. And we are led by our clan mothers. When families lived together many years ago in the longhouse, and a male might be disturbing the peace in the longhouse, we would send the disruptive male out to the woods to stand his back up against the white pine until he could center and clear himself. And at that point, he would be allowed to re-enter the longhouse once he was cleared. But it was up against that white pine. And he could be there for hours, but he knew when he was ready to come back to the longhouse, when he was calm. It's a highly spiritual healing tree. My favorite Potawatomi author, educator, and botanist, Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, Gathering Moss, and Serviceberry, so eloquently describes this as she talks about trees as our teachers. In this clip, she shares on connection, respect, and honor, and how we see the woods and forests as a gift filled with wonder, life, and medicine.
And once you come to know the different beings that are around you, you see not only stories, but the way that the land cares for you. Just standing in this place, I see the food of the hickory, the food of the maples, the string of the basswood, and I see medicine. Right here in front of us, that black, flaky bark is a black cherry. And did you ever wonder why cough drops almost always come in black cherry flavor? It's because black cherry is a cough medicine. And the bark of the twigs of that tree boiled down make a really good soothing cough medicine. And so, yes, you look at the world as full of biodiversity and these amazing beings living their lives, but they also are in relationship with us. And you see the cedars, really good respiratory medicine. We'll get close to one later. We came by a hemlock, which is super good for colds. It has tons of vitamin C in it. So they're medicines. They're medicines all around us to be honored, to be respected. And in fact, in our Potawatomi language, the word for plants is mishkakin, which means the medicines, but it also means, if you take that word mishkakin apart, it means the strength of the earth. And so when we talk about plants healing us, they're healing us with the strength of the earth. And to feel that and to feel all those gifts that are all around you makes the woods into a very different place.
The sugar maple, abundant here in the Northeast, proves to be more than just sweetness on top of your pancakes and French toast, and has been a staple in the Northeastern tribes for millennia, representing life-giving and teaching us about building good soil, as Robin describes. We harvested the syrup when the first full moon of the vernal equinox, the sugar moon, appeared. This time signals the new year, springtime, a time of new life and new growth, filling the world with her new gifts of food and medicine. I had the wonderful honor of sharing a fireside chat with Robin Wall Kimmerer last June at the Museum of Science in Boston, and I'll share a few of the pertinent clips.
What happens in nature teaches us so much about ourselves: adaptability, patience, flexibility, resilience, respect, and gratitude. These are things that I learned from many decades of gardening and working really closely with the land in land restoration efforts. However, in current times, many people are scared and exhausted by what's going on around us. But I see an increase in different acts of kindness happening, in contrast to the adversity that we're all experiencing in our everyday lives. And this is where I like to stay, because I can get pretty down about what's going on in the world right now. So I go outside, I go to nature, I go to the ocean, I go to the trails of B.B. Woods in Woods Hole. Nature and connecting to nature can be the vehicle of joy, happiness, freedom, love, self-care, if we're open to her, if we let her in. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of man's history with the natural world and the reparative work that needs to happen and be done first before we think of ourselves?
You know, I want to answer that question, but I also want to thank you for invoking the land and the plants as teachers, especially in these troubled times. Like you, I really seek the solace and the guidance of the natural world. And I feel moved to tell you that one of my greatest teachers is a sugar maple, an anemonic, of my acquaintance who is, probably 250 years old. She's kind of beat up. She's missing a lot of branches. She's seen a lot of lightning and bugs in her years. And when I go to her and say, wow, we're in a place right now. We're in a place. And she, out of her 250 years, says, things happen. Things come and go. She said, I've seen a lot of, let's say, people come and go. And the teachings of sugar maples is what we always have to do is build good soil. Build good soil for the future. Look at a sugar maple. They're giving everything away to the future. They are building that maple soil. It's going to bring us trillium and berries and medicines. And so I take so much guidance from that teaching of build good soil. That's how we make a future.
Our forests do, in fact, make a future by healing us with the strength of the earth, with her life and her medicine, and it is through a subsistence worldview. This refers to the complex set of cultural relationships that make up this worldview based upon an ancient traditional knowledge of the natural world. In Indigenous cultures, oral tradition and cultural life ways were passed from generation to generation through the repetition of these lived experiences, stories, ceremonial practices, and relationships, kinships to the natural world. These stories for us represent unparalleled forms of truth-telling, offering a nuanced history that is unavailable from other sources. It is a record. It is a continuum of our relationships and our ancestral ways of resilience, resistance, joy, strength, pride, hope, and not through a colonized lens, but one of our own, evidenced by our own Indigenous knowledges and survival skills that always provided for us and sustained us. And in these spaces are where thousands of year-old histories and stories are held, stories that depict our relationality to all living things, generations and generations of people living in relationship and kinship to the land and water from which we come, a kind of human relationship to the land and water that always has and always will be in balance and beneficial for all living creatures. It's about gratitude. It is place-based, and it is about reciprocity in such a place.
Reciprocity how is that universally applied? There's so many elements to that. It does remind us that as human people, we are one species in this whole web of kinship, and that natural law applies to us and our economic and political structures, just as it does for the ecosystem. And we humans, thinking again about what does it mean to be human, we Western humans anyway, seem to have this fiction that the laws of nature don't apply to us. We're at this top of this pyramid, fictional pyramid of human exceptionalism, and that kindly the world has, repealed the laws of thermodynamics on behalf of our own society. I don't think so. So this notion of living in reciprocity reminds us that we are subject to natural law, and that we could structure our societies in ways that harmonize with natural law, which makes life much easier and also is joyful and just. So to me, that is a big element of reciprocity, is remembering that we humans are not just takers, and the earth is not just our property, but we are givers as well, that we are essential to the functioning of the planet as reciprocal givers in return for all the gifts that Mother Earth gives us.
How we view our old growth forests is vital to their future. They are our elders, wise and learned. These elder trees hold the forest's complex web of life together. They teach their young to go out into the world to thrive. And when the young ail, they send some of their best energy, vitamins, and rich food to them through their root systems, reminding us of how inherently intelligent they are. They're constantly giving and providing endless gifts, teaching us the most important ways of being here on earth, how we share, how we give back. These ancient elders are the wisest of us all, and we ought to rewild ourselves back to them. Let's hear from Robin again on some of these teachings.
So the concept of a gift economy is deeply embedded in Indigenous cultures because of our ancestrally rooted value systems of living in reciprocity with not just the natural world, but our communities and our families. It speaks to our communal ties by giving and receiving, planting, foraging, and harvesting, baking that homemade blueberry pie, frying some herring, or steaming a basket of clams for thy elder neighbor or an auntie. In this way, we are in constant appreciation of the earth's bounty as a gift and not an extracted resource. In Serviceberry, Robin, you wrote that receiving a gift from the land is coupled to the responsibilities of sharing, of respect, of reciprocity, and gratitude, a kind of gratitude that brings us to the realization that our lives are nurtured, completely nurtured from the body of the Earth Mother. But in an increasingly resource extractive and overdeveloped world, can you help us to understand the benefits of a circular relationship that you talked about a little earlier, but one directly between people and the earth?
You know, when we start to think about the world, the earth, as you said, is gifts of Mother Earth, not natural resources, not commodities, not private property, but gifts from a loving Mother Earth. Think about in your own life, if the example I like to use is if you went to the store and bought a pair of socks, and they were woolly and red and comfy, but when you exchanged money for them, when money was the currency of the well-being of your toes, you don't have any responsibility to those socks. You know, you could take care of them, or you could let the dog chew them up, but they're your property, right? But what if those socks were hand knit for you by your loving grandma? oh, they still keep your feet warm, right? They're still red and fuzzy, but everything is different. Because the currency of those socks is not money, it's love, it's gratitude, it's relationship. And to me, that's the difference between this market economy and a gift economy. The currency is not money. The currency is relationship and love and gratitude. So we behave very, very differently when that is the currency. And the beautiful thing is, you know, when you buy those socks at the store, do you feel like you want to go to the clerk and give her a birthday present? You have no relationship. But what about when it's your grandma's birthday? You want to reciprocate the gift with an equally loving framework, right? i.e., it invites reciprocity. It invites us to remember as human beings that we all have gifts, and that that's the responsibility. We say we are given gifts, but those gifts are coupled to the responsibility to use them because the whole world needs them.
Especially when those gifts are woven, the socks are woven from the milkweed off of the land, and the redness comes from the cranberry or the blueberry or the berries that create the dye. So the qualitative approach has such longer-term impacts in terms of how we respect and live with and on the land.
Absolutely, and I love how you framed that in terms of the materials that went into those socks. Mm-hmm. When we know there are plant relatives, for example, it makes them all the more precious. I think the key in our contemporary consumerist society is to remember that every pair of socks, shall we say, every single thing that we buy is a gift of Mother Earth. I mean, that everything. And if we treat all that we consume as a gift from Mother Earth, we are now into the realm of the honorable harvest, as opposed to the dishonorable harvest, in which we just take as if it wasn't the lives of our plant and animal relatives that we're consuming.
Right. In respecting this honorable harvest approach, I recognize some of the most promising work to protect our forests will not come from just one worldview, but from different ways of knowing. Many have heard of two-eyed seeing, which is a unique perspective that highlights seeing from one eye with the strengths of Indigenous knowledge in different ways of knowing, and from the other eye with the strengths of Western knowledge and ways of knowing. And learning to use both of these eyes together, utilizing both lenses for multiple perspectives and contexts for the benefit of all. From its interconnectivity and the power of its greater capacity, it brings reciprocity and responsibility into the science. It's a mutual responsibility. It will come from a collective action, one action not more important than the other, but instead collectively reflects our shared values in the protection of these sacred spaces.
So we have a question from Jean-Luc. The wampum belt embodies collective action through the clams who gave shells and the many hands it took to construct the belt. How can we foster reciprocity through collective action in an Indigenous, determined, sustainable future?
What a beautiful question. I wish I had the luxury to really sit with that question, because the notion, I think the piece of it that I want to really illuminate is the collective action. And to tie it to the economy, as Jean-Luc is doing, you know, we say that economic theorists would tell us that human beings are always going to act economically, politically, ecologically in our self-interest, right? But the difference when we talk about collective action is, what is the self? Is the self just me? And am I going to be, embedded in a hyper-individualistic society where, yes, I'm going to make all of my decisions to benefit me? But when I think of who I am also my family. I am also my land. I am in my bones the white pine tea that I drink. My boundary is very permeable. So if the self includes 7 generations of human people, if it includes white pines and otters and ginger root, then I will act in that self-interest. But I think that's the power of kinship thinking, which is at the heart of the Indigenous worldview, is that it's collective well-being. The self is not limited to this one body and consciousness.
So as we look to the Earth Mother to continue to guide us, and we remember that many humans from the current generation, as well as many from the past, are paying the price for the small-minded view that asserts that natural capital is infinite and the quality of it constant. So in being good kin to the Earth Mother, we ought to honor her and foster more connection and healing through our relationship to her. So I'll close with my favorite question to Robin that wraps up my fireside chat.
One of my favorite topics as a mother. In Braiding Sweetgrass, A Mother's Work, you talk about being a good mother means teaching your children to care for the world. And I talk about this a lot, about those next generations, and how we ought to nurture the natural world. You talk about this, Robin. A tree being a good mother nurtures a full crop of apples by gathering the energy of the world into herself and passing it on. The tree sending her young out into the world well provisioned. Her young are the apples, of course, well provisioned for the journey, packaged in sweetness to share with the world. This resonates with me so deeply it could bring tears to my eyes right now. To bring more light to this, can you share with us how your idea of motherhood is rooted in Mother Nature herself?
Don't look at me like that, we'll both cry. When I think about the incredible generosity of the living world, of Mother Earth, there's a chapter in Braiding Sweetgrass the epiphany in the beans, that moment when I realize that my garden loves me back. My garden is feeding me, the woods are feeding me, the river is teaching me what I need to know. Everything that I need to live is provided for me by the earth. It is our generous mother, not only in physical provisioning, the way our moms give us life from their own bodies, and then nurture us as infants from their own bodies. That is my experience of Mother Earth, to know that my life, and therefore the life of my beloveds, is completely contingent upon the gifts of Mother Earth. And so in Potawatomi ways, when we talk about Mother Earth, it's not just a loose metaphor for generosity. It is that knowing that we are loved like children from the body of our mother. And when we really recognize that, when we really feel that love from the land, if we could feel that, it seems to me, perhaps naively, that would change the way that we behave. Would we harm the one who loves us? I don't know that we would. And so the language and the teachings and the deep physical and emotional and spiritual understanding of the earth as mother and the love that we are showered with leaves no room for harm for her. You wouldn't harm your mother. And so the deep emotional and spiritual engagement with this idea of our earthly mother is one of the most powerful and transcendent elements of our Indigenous worldview and wisdom.
For she is the giver of all life.
Yeah.
Katapatanamu, thank you all.